At the end of every season since I've had my channel for the past 2 years, I post my top 5 best and worst drivers of that season. It's a rolling list that I change from race to race, but one man that will definitely be there barring a catastrophic end to the season in the remaining few races is Daniel Ricciardo. There is no doubt that talent-wise he is easily in the top 5 in F1 right now, and that in the right car he could be more than capable of challenging the likes of Verstappen and Hamilton for a world title. He's reached the point in his career where he is in his absolute prime. He's got that perfect blend of speed and experience, and he's someone who is very highly regarded on the F1 grid. Despite all of this, however, Daniel has been bouncing around the grid over the past few years, going from Red Bull, then taking that risky move down the grid to Renault, and now of course he's going into yet another brand new team in McLaren in 2021. Now, whether or not he will truly find the success that he deserves at McLaren, only time will truly tell. However, in this video, I did just want to take a look back at Ricciardo's stellar 2020 season, why his move to McLaren will be a career-defining move, and why I'm personally starting to have just little doubts creep in as to whether or not he really did make the right choice for 2021. There's no doubt that Ricciardo has easily been one of the standout drivers of 2020. The strange thing is, I feel as if his season to an extent is almost going a little bit unnoticed. He's obviously not getting the same attention as a Hamilton who's breaking records left, right and center. He hasn't been going through a redemption season like Pierre Gasly, and he's not completely just out driving a mediocre car and performing miracles like Leclerc is at Ferrari. Ricciardo has just been Ricciardo basically in 2020. He's been ultra consistent, especially in the second half of the season, and he's delivered exactly what he was brought into the team to do in the first place by bringing the current Renault team their first ever podium in Germany at the Eiffel Grand Prix with a 3rd place finish, and then repeating the same success at Imola. Yet, despite all of this, I still feel as though he's kind of flown under the radar so far this season. As I'm recording this right now after the Bahrain Grand Prix, he currently sits 4th in the driver's standings, having scored in all but 3 of the races so far this season. Looking forward going into the last few races, that battle for 4th place could be a very close fight between both Ricciardo and Perez, who of course himself had a surefire podium taken away from him in Bahrain after he retired with only a few laps to go, which is what has given Ricciardo the edge going into the final 2 races. However, I don't think necessarily that finishing either 4th or 5th will really change anything for Ricciardo, because he's one of those drivers that has nothing to prove. When he was at Red Bull, he was more than a match for Max Verstappen, and he's proved again in 2020, not that he really needed to anyway, that he is still the class of the midfield and undoubtedly a top 5 driver on the grid. To be honest, it's a very similar situation from my point of view to the way I look at Lewis Hamilton, by which I mean I'm not really surprised to see that Lewis, is grabbing pole and then converting it into a race win time after time, because that is exactly what I expect from him. In the same way in which I don't get surprised to see Ricciardo leading that midfield after a very solid season, and I say that as a compliment in the sense that Ricciardo to me doesn't really have surprise results anymore, because in my opinion, that is his standard, that is where he belongs, and that is genuinely how good he is, and that is exactly what he has proven time after time in 2020. This is where my doubts truly lie in his decision to leave Renault at the beginning of 2020. Now, we must remember that all of this crazy driver market shenanigans, which started with Ferrari letting go of Vettel, actually happened before the season even started, and well before we really got to see the true performance and development of the 2020 cars. There is no doubt that compared to where Renault were in winter testing and where they were at the beginning of the season compared to McLaren and Racing Point, they have made some substantial progress over the course of 2020, and have not only done a great job to catch up to the crazy competitive midfield, but have also laid down some great foundations to improve for next season. And the fact that Ricciardo has been at the center of all of their recent success and chose to leave the team for a fresh new challenge for next year, I just hope that his 2 years of helping Renault to improve and helping them to get to where they are now will not go to waste, with Alonso and Ocon reaping the rewards when Ricciardo leaves. And this kind of leads me on to next season, because the most exciting thing I'm looking forward to in 2021 will be once again the battle in that midfield, because in my opinion, all four of the really big hitters in that midfield have a great case for getting even better next year. In terms of Racing Point, not only are they becoming Aston Martin and getting a 4-time world champion onto the team with Vettel joining them, they'll also, due to the current development rules, be able to take certain parts from the 2020 Mercedes for next year, so definitely expect them to make a big jump up. When it comes to McLaren, the biggest thing they've got going for them, of course, is the Mercedes power unit in 2021, which, although might not necessarily be quote-unquote faster because Renault and Honda have seriously caught up, the Merc power unit will be a huge upgrade in terms of reliability, and McLaren will hope that it will return them to the same success that they previously had as McLaren Mercedes. In terms of Renault, they've arguably been the most impressive midfield team in terms of actual development of the car, because it's one thing to be able to take advantage of the 2020 Mercedes for next year, and it's another thing pinning all of your hopes on the Mercedes power unit to further you up the grid in 2021. But in the case of Renault, they've had the more natural progression this year by improving their car over the course of the season, arguably looking even better than McLaren in terms of the aero side on different circuits, and even their power unit, although the reliability is still very questionable, the Renault PU has been pretty handy around power circuits, and with both of those upsides, who is to say that they don't come up with an even better chassis and power unit combo in 2021? And then finally, I can't not mention Ferrari as well, because although they have been the biggest disappointment of 2020, at the end of the day, they are still a manufactured team with a huge budget and complete control over their own power unit, and it was only last season that they were able to make a car capable of race wins, so don't completely be surprised if they do somehow get their act together and over the course of the winter break actually do bring out an okay car for 21, which could maybe propel them back up the grid and help them to challenge for race wins yet again. So, to take it all back to Daniel Ricciardo, there is absolutely no guarantees that McLaren was the right choice, because any one of four teams all have a very strong case to improve next year, be the best of the rest, and potentially, and hopefully for us as fans, close the gap to Red Bull and Mercedes and be able to fight for race wins. So this is why, although I am very excited to see how the midfield battle plays out in 2021, I've also just had this horrible feeling all season long that Daniel Ricciardo, through no fault of his own, has possibly made another sideways move, or even possibly a step down if McLaren cannot build a competitive package in 2021. Fundamentally, a Mercedes engine doesn't give you a free pass to being a consistent podium contender. Racing Point had a Merc engine last year and were nowhere, and Williams have a Mercedes engine this year and are still at the back of the grid. McLaren need to make sure that they don't just take getting a Mercedes engine for granted, and that they still keep their foot on the gas in terms of developing the rest of the car to match the race-winning potential of that power unit. But of course, the question then becomes, how much time and money do they sacrifice to make sure that Ricciardo is given a quality package in 2021 and that he is happy with the choice that he has made without hurting the development going into the new regs in 2022. The other half of the coin for Ricciardo is the young and hungry driver whose team he's stepping into. Now, when it comes to his current teammate at Renault, I do think that Esteban has improved and gotten closer to Daniel over the course of 2020, and despite not having the best season back after taking that year out of F1, in my opinion he has been relatively solid, if not really outstanding, in that midfield so far this season. And I think it's very obvious as well that Ocon and Ricciardo work well together and do have a good teammate dynamic. However, Ricciardo has comfortably beaten Ocon this year, both in terms of the championship and definitely when it comes to qualifying, as Ocon, with only 2 races to go, has only ever outqualified Daniel once all year. When it comes to being partnered with Lando, however, that is going to be a lot more tricky. Honestly, calling which of these two will finish ahead of each other next year to me could honestly be the flip of a coin. As things stand at the moment, there is no doubt that Daniel is the better driver at the moment, but Lando is on the rise, and if he can finish ahead of Sainz this season, that would be a huge statement of intent and a massive confidence boost to him as the team leader of McLaren, with Ricciardo coming in next season. As good as Lando is, I'm still not 100% confident enough personally to label him as a surefire future world champion, because for anyone that has watched my channel for a while, you will know that I don't just throw around that term to any driver after they have one or two good results. Lando is someone I'm going to talk about in depth later on during the winter break most likely, but going up against Ricciardo next year after being the #1 at the team will be the first big litmus test in terms of where Lando ranks amongst the best drivers on the grid, and if he can really step his game up and dominate Ricciardo like a future world champion should. As far as Ricciardo, he can't treat Lando as a joke because this is Lando's team. He will have the early advantage, having the familiarity and knowing all of the ins and outs of the 2021 package, and it will be Ricciardo who will have to use all of his years of experience to make sure that he gets up to speed as soon as possible. Many people are expecting that Lando and Daniel are just going to be the two class clowns on the grid at McLaren, and whilst there is no doubt that their dynamic will be so much fun to watch, and don't even get me started on the meme value of that driver lineup, I do think that it could also be a very big and very important rivalry in a way as well, and a huge turning point in the careers of both of these two drivers depending on who comes out on top. For Daniel, it's pretty straightforward. Theoretically, being in his absolute prime, he should overcome the new team aspect like he did in 2019 and beat his new and young teammate. But for Lando, that would make things very complicated, being that many people are labeling him as a surefire future world champion, and if he really is, he needs to get serious and not just be the Mr. Funny guy. He'll need to go out and not just beat Ricciardo, but he'll need to show that champion's mentality by dominating him and psychologically letting him know that he is the #1 at McLaren, exactly like Leclerc did in his first season for Ferrari, and like Hamilton did in his first season for McLaren as well. In the end, this move is a risky one for Ricciardo because not only is McLaren not certain to move up the grid in 2021, but if he loses to Lando, that could potentially be the end of any talks of him winning a title in the future, because again, Lando is only going to get better and better from here on out. So although I think that he is coming into a fun environment and a team that do look to be on the rise, he needs to come into that team with a killer mentality and establish himself as the best driver before the rule changes in 2022, because if he doesn't, then I genuinely think that we could begin to see Ricciardo sliding down the grid. From my point of view, I still fully back Ricciardo to come into McLaren and show his class in 2021 by quickly getting to grips with his new car and his new team, and in the end I do sway more on the side of Ricciardo beating Norris, but I'm never going to count Lando Norris out because he has that potential to raise his game and elevate and surprise even more in 2021. In summary, it can't go completely unmentioned, however, that there is a very real possibility that if this move does not work out in 2021 and then in 2022, then Daniel Ricciardo could enter into a world of missed opportunities. If Ricciardo finishes his career and doesn't win a championship, or even in worst case scenario, if he never even gets a legitimate chance to even contend for a title for even just 1 year, honestly, I think we could be looking at the greatest and most talented driver to never win a world championship, and someone who will have to be included amongst names like Gilles Villeneuve, Rubens Barrichello, and the great Sir Stirling Moss. Because in my opinion, Daniel Ricciardo, regardless of championship or not, he is just that special. Well guys, there you go. That is my video on Daniel Ricciardo and his move to McLaren for 2021. Now let me know in the comments below guys, do you think this was 100% the right move for Daniel, or do you, like me, also have just a few little reservations there and there in terms of the car and also going up against Lando Norris as teammates? Let me know all of your thoughts in the comments box below. I cannot wait to see what you guys think. Now if you did enjoy this video, then don't forget to drop a like, smash that subscribe button, and don't forget to check out my social medias. Instagram and Twitter will be above. And guys, I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys.